guys hear me all right? Good. I'm James Rafel. Welcome to your first session, if you weren't here yesterday. Hopefully, I'll try to keep your interest along with my co-presenter, Jeremy Hill, here. We are from Geisinger, which is a health system here in Pennsylvania, mostly to the east of here. We also have some presence here and south and in New Jersey and a couple of other spots. So what we're going to talk about, and I tried to tweet about it a little bit, this is not going to put you to sleep with all stuff about HIPAA. So this is a techie conference, a nerd conference, so we're going to try to keep your interest, talk about how the two of them combined and into what we do at Geisinger, but also what you guys can hopefully do back with your organizations using a lot of the technologies that we've learned over the years. I've been coming to this for, I think, 8 years, on and off. Couldn't come the first year because we weren't allowed. It was just a Penn State thing, but this is a fantastic conference, as you probably know since you're sitting here.
I was here the first year.
Okay, so about me real quick, as you can see, I do work on the IT side at Geisinger. My co-presenter here, Jeremy, works on the Geisinger in Motion side, and I don't know if you want to explain a little bit what Geisinger in Motion is.
Yeah, we also have to explain what Geisinger in Motion is. Everybody thinks that it's our wellness program. It's not. What we focus on in Geisinger in Motion is the business and cultural side of digital transformation. So what we look at is trying to bring healthcare and what providers and nurses and EMS personnel do and make it function in a much more mobile environment. So we focus on mobile technologies, mobile devices, emerging internet technologies to kind of take the doctors and nurses away from workstations and out and have them be able to work wherever they are and see patients in the home or be able to work with patients virtually anywhere.
Okay, so that's us. So we'll start with not this. So this is a 100-and-something page government document that talks all about what HIPAA is and such, and we're not going to talk about that. What I'm going to give you, since everybody appears to be of the age that understands and remembers what Cliff Notes are, as opposed to Spark Notes or just Googling on the internet, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of what we're talking about here. So 1996, HIPAA, the word HIPAA came into play. Had until 2003 to reach some compliance, and then the security rule piece of it in 2005. So what that all boils down to is this last line here. Since 2005, at least at Geisinger, and probably in, well, we are very security conscious. That's the nicest way to put it. Our internal audits, our information security department work with their external auditors, and if there is any hint of non-compliance with HIPAA, our vendors have to jump through a lot of hoops to get their products in. So what I will say is the best thing you can do if you are either supporting a company or on the vendor side. I know we have a couple of vendor representatives here, and I won't knock them too much for their hoop jumping with HIPAA. But the best thing that you can do is create a document, an onboarding type of document for your vendors. So let's say you want to bring in a new learning management system, a new cardiology system, any kind of system. The best thing that you can do is develop a document that clearly delineates what you need to know about what their product does in wording that is as simple as possible. And here's why. Because I think the vendor world runs the gambit of people like our friends at Apple, all the way down to people in their mom's basement coding and putting out an app. Either way, they still have to comply with all this stuff that's in that document. So how you can help yourself is to create a document. Now, Geisinger has created a document. We've morphed that document, and it currently lives as a 50-ish question document. It used to be 100-ish questions, and a lot of confusion arose over it. But what we have had success in doing with our vendors is getting that document attached to contracts. And because it's then attached to contracts, we can hold our vendors not liable, but up to what they say their product will do. There are other pieces of this that I'm not a legal person and not a contracts person, so I'm not going to get very deep into it, but there are business associate agreements. You might have heard that term as well. Those are essentially agreements between the two parties that the liability piece does start to come into play. So you definitely, that is what you want. If you can't get that because the vendor doesn't feel like they need to sign that, then that second document is going to be your best friend. So at that point, any questions about HIPAA, government regulations, things like that, because I'd like to move on to the more interesting stuff, if you don't mind. All right.
James, the one thing I would add there, something that we have to work with at Geisinger is that our information security office reports directly to the Board of Trustees. They do not report through IT in any sort of manner, so they do not report to the CEO, CIO, or anyone else. So nobody can sidestep our information security office either. So there's no, oh, the CEO wants it, so it can, no, they report directly to the board. So that's a little bit of a different structure than what a lot of places may see.
Which is why we live in the world we live in, because we haven't been able to get around the rules. So that being said, 2005, when the rule, you can boo and hiss if you want, when the rule came out, this was our world, our corporate IT world. It was the world of Windows, the world of BlackBerries, the compliance, the antivirus, the patching. That's what we had to deal with. And in 2007, I call it the consumerization of IT. That's when first-gen iPhone came out, and in 2008, our people wanted email on iPhones. 2010, first iPad. A year later, iPad for staff, iPad app for staff. And then a couple of years after that, somebody got the wild idea that we could spend hundreds of dollars on a survey tool, an iPad, as opposed to doing it on paper. And they did a cost-benefit analysis and determined that actually spending the money on the iPads was better, and interfacing it with back-end systems was better than paper and copying and doing that type of analysis. So, since 2014, now, I will preface this with, this is not a marketing video. Well, actually, this is a marketing video. This is not a marketing video for you guys. This is a video that kind of explains, in a nutshell, what we do at Geisinger with Apple things. So I will hit play here. Yeah, that's good.
Geisinger Health System is an integrated delivery system that takes care of about 3 million patients. And everything we do is about caring for them. Our true north is taking care of people. So how can we use technology to keep our patients healthy? Geisinger made a strategic decision to use Apple and iOS devices across the hospital because it takes friction out of the care process and it improves the experience for patients.
Screws link the two pieces of bone back together. It's like bringing
The mission was not to just continue the way healthcare had been practiced to date, but really to think about what's the next way we can take care of patients. So what we do is we give them iPads so they can be better connected, better engaged while they're in the hospital. With MyChart Bedside from Epic, they can check their labs in a way that's understandable for them, and we use it to teach patients about their chronic condition.
initial results of the MRI.
Before an operating room procedure, particularly for children, we use iPads as distraction therapy, which reduces the amount of sedation and pain medication the patient has to receive. And we know that means that the patient recovers faster. in the neonatal intensive care unit. iPads connect in the mom who may not be physically present with the baby through FaceTime. This is a time when they're supposed to be bonding, and they're being pulled apart because the baby's sick. That interaction is huge for the baby and the parents.
Mama's here.
We'll also use an iPad for children who are supposed to be in school. If they're stuck in the hospital with a chronic condition, instead of falling behind in their classes, they can be virtually connected to the classroom.
Our purpose is to care for our patients. You can't do that without caring for your doctors and nurses and support staff. The iOS platform enables them to do the job that they're supposed to be doing better.
Just in the last few years, we were tethered to workstations. And anytime you're using those devices, you're not out accomplishing tasks and taking care of patients.
Epic, Haiku, and Canto give doctors the most up-to-date information before they walk into the patient's room. With Canto, you can also order medications right at the bedside.
iPad and iPhone have become now indispensable. They get us back out with our patients, taking care of them.
These tools have allowed us to connect with people and work in a completely different way. Our patient satisfaction has never been higher. Our employee recruitment and retention has never been better. The iOS platform is not only making it easier for patients, but driving the cost of healthcare down in allowing our staff to live out their purpose of helping others, to care for the people that we're so privileged to serve.
And as you can see, the Apple logo at the end means we had a little help with the video from our friends at Apple. And we thank them for that. So, like I said, it's a lot of marketing going on in there. You saw a bunch of Apple logos. You saw a double robot. I'm going to talk about some of these projects in a second. But taking away from that, one of the things that our CEO said was, it does drive costs down. As crazy as it might sound, because we all have to buy Apple devices and the infrastructure that goes with them for our companies, as crazy as it sounds, once you start connecting some of these pieces together, it actually does drive some costs down. So, also in 2014, requisite Star Trek slide here. As I said, my name is James. I was told in 2014, not told, I changed jobs. For the first 15 years at Geisinger, I was on the infrastructure side, on the client side. So I was in that world. I was in probably most of your worlds today. In 2014, I had an opportunity to change to where I am now on the team that deals with the application side of everything that Geisinger does in the clinical world, minus our electronic health record. So I was assigned in 2014 a job that really had to make me think differently. And for anybody that is heads down programming, infrastructure side of IT, this is something that you may or may not realize, because in your world, you are given a job, you are to keep the lights on, you are to implement new technologies, you are to basically keep the nuts and the bolts in place. But, and this is, like I said, one of the best lessons I learned from my current manager, my current VP, is you got to remember, we're not an IT shop. We are a hospital. We care for patients. We have to make sure that those patients get the best care that they can. So that was kind of one of those aha moments. I knew it was there, and I knew we had to be doing those kind of things in my previous life, but now seeing up close and personal what's going on with the patients, this was what needed to happen. So also around there, I will throw this slide up here just because it's a nod to the folks at JAMF. You could use any MDM. As anybody that was here yesterday and sat through the Apple presentation, the nice thing about all of the MDM vendors is they have I don't want to say a limited set of things that they can do. But over the years, as MDM has matured, it was pretty much a level playing field. Now, some companies are starting to differentiate themselves as technology changes. But again, we use Jamf, no shameless plug, but it is all about the next couple of slides because you can only do so much with the technology. So it's Jamf plus all of this stuff that allows us to do what we do. At the top, you see DEP. For those that have iPads and are going through the automated process, some of our projects, many of our projects, run the gambit of user interaction, a lot of user interaction, to hopefully no user interaction. So DEP allows us to very tightly control some of our projects. And I'm going to actually show one of our iPads in a little bit. VPP, apps for every occasion. So Geisinger currently has, we'll call it over 1,000 applications that we have to support on the IT side. App-wise, what's our app list up to? About 200 apps. So some of them are very simple, Candy Crush, and I'll explain that in a project that's coming up in a second, all the way to two of the apps that you heard on the video, Epics, Haiku, and Canto, which allows the physicians to get a view into a patient medical record on their iDevice. So we have to be able to be flexible. VPP allows us to do that. Also multiple installation methods, whether they're installed by default or available self-service. The next three are where kind of IT shifts into something that is not normally on the infrastructure, heads down IT side of things. So the project I'm going to talk about first, our interactive patient system, was something we had to come up with because we were given a square peg to fit into a round hole. And I'll get into some details in a second. But what we do is figure out these things. I have one guy here this morning. The other one is in a different session, but our Apple support team has been invaluable through this process because they know that deep down tech. They can work with us because we know the clinical workflows. And the last item there with the partnerships, that's the first one, IT. Working together to figure these solutions out is the only way they're going to work. An IT-only project is not going to be, it's not going to capture the clinical workflows. It's not going to capture the other workflows that your end users might be doing unless it's a mature project management process. So those last three are key. So from that magic, so this is what we have right now. So I feel it's a lot of devices. I've run into a couple of people here who support more. So just understand that the reason this slide is up here are the 5 columns that we have. So there's a lot of things that we do with these devices, and it's grown exponentially since 2014. I keep looking, Matt Schultz, I have to give him a little bit of credit here. He is also, he's the infrastructure guy that thankfully I hired a long time ago. And he has grown immensely with the technology. And without him, a lot of this wouldn't be possible. So I will, so that we have it on camera, that he gets his credit. Because
What's the review color?
Exactly. Well, because in IT, again, most people don't see us. They see the forward-facing people. They see the Jeremys. No knock against what Jeremy does, but IT does deserve some credit sometimes. So these devices are working really well because of that group. So that's what we've got today. And Jeremy's going to talk about some of the BYOD stuff, as well as some of the projects that are going on with iPhones, iPods, iPads. I'm going to focus in on mostly the iPad world. So,
Yeah, one of my favorite questions in any given week is, Matt, is it possible to? No, you get that one a lot, don't you?
So, what I'm going to talk about now, again, this is not a marketing pitch. I'm going to hopefully show some of the tech behind what we do so that people can maybe learn a few things. I always have learned stuff at this conference. So that's what I'm going to try to do here, as well as some project management info, tips, and tricks. So I'm going to talk about the patient side of the world. Jeremy's going to talk about the provider side of the world in a little bit. So the 4 projects that I'll go through right now. One, our interactive patient system. That is my favorite thing. My job, I tell people, and sometimes it's more of a pain, but I do love this job immensely because of what we're able to do with this technology. So our interactive patient system is, in a nutshell, iPads for patients. Our Classroom Connect program, you saw a little 5-second mention of that in the video, so I'll talk about that. We do language interpretation through iPads, as well as telemedicine, which is a very interesting and very growing area in the healthcare world. So our interactive patient system, this is kind of the mission at the top here. Keep the patients engaged, informed, connected, and entertained throughout the care process. It does promote faster recovery and better decision-making and increase patient satisfaction. But that asterisk is there. So down here, all that, this is what happened to us at the beginning of the project. Using new technology on a TV in the room, data security flawless, of course, because, you know, infection control, when in the healthcare world, infection control is at the forefront because you don't want them coming in with a problem and then staying there with a different problem. Down there, clinical staff buy-in, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller because from the project perspective, and I think most folks know this who have run any size project, without a scope at the beginning of the project, it's going to go off the rails at any point in time. So scoping this project was like herding cats because our steering committee involved a wide variety of stakeholders at a wide variety of levels, from executive to physician leadership to nursing leadership, IT leadership, and if you're hearing the common thread there, it's all leadership at the steering committee level. And if anybody's dealt with the steering committee before, you know, kind of like what Jeremy described, they have all these ideas, and then IT has to figure it out. So at the time, they were sold a bill of goods by a vendor who said, through your room TV, you can do all this stuff. You can let patients play games, and you can give them surveys, and they can watch movies, and they can order their food, and so on and so forth. The problem was it was cost prohibitive, and at the time, we had a new leader who was very interested in eye devices and figuring out how they could fit into the clinical space. So you throw all that together and you end up with, hey, James, you're in a new job. We're going to give you this project. Go. So my first stop was Matt and that team, and we started to work through how could we actually do this, because one of the key requirements was on a TV, and Apple TV had just come out. So as you can see up on the screen there, those are our key components. And I will say, you can't put people up here, but the partnerships, and I'll talk about this in a second, the partnerships with your vendors as well as your other IT folks are like gold. And here's why. So some of the needs that were in our scope were flexible configurations. So this would mean you can give the iPad to a patient. The patient can do whatever they want on the iPad. They didn't want a limit. Well, for those that have worked with Apple IDs and attended some of the sessions in previous years, you know having an Apple ID on these devices then makes that really difficult. So we had to figure out flexible configurations. We had to figure out the app requirements. The 100+ apps that are on these devices range in use from, I mentioned Candy Crush before. So in the video, you might have heard the doctor talk about how working with an iPad on the pediatric side sometimes helps with pain management. And as crazy as it sounds, it does. There have been studies that have shown and compared pain medication versus a kid focused on Candy Crush or some other game, distraction, it actually distracts them from their pain. So we've got, in this configuration, games, social media, streaming video to some extent, like Netflix and Hulu and such. However, we don't provide that. They have to have their own account because nobody wants to play together with Hollywood and figure out how to license things nicely. So again, that was a hurdle to overcome. There are web clips and iBooks for education. So as you saw, one of the goals was to educate and engage patients. So part of that process involved figuring out how to take all of the paper documents or VCR, and as funny as this sounds, one of the conversions that we did was we took, and I don't see one in here, the big old tube TVs on the carts with the VCR. Moms had to watch a video before they were allowed to take their babies home, and they were wheeling these gigantic things into the room. So we were able to digitize that process, turn it into a web clip, and let them take away the maintenance and the need to have those TVs. So, cost savings there. All that on this nice, shiny, infection-controlled iPad. The TV piece, for those that have worked with Apple TVs, they can be wired, they can be wireless. Well, our network folks were not thrilled with the prospect of dealing with Apple TVs, especially when we talked Apple TV and Netflix and things like that. So constraints for that, network-friendly, management-friendly. We started with the first generation Apple TV before the latest Apple TV with all the great MDM-y things that you can do with it. It was interesting, but it has worked. Basically, we use them to reflect AirPlay up to the TV. We're not running any of the apps on it, but one of the patient stories that I like to tell, again, if you don't get out into your company's world outside of your IT space, you're missing out on why they're there. So this has allowed us, this project has allowed my team to get out and see patients. Not in a clinical sense, but just see what they do. So we ran into one patient, actually because the Apple TV had broken, and he was sitting in his room, and he was on our ortho floor, and he had some problem with his spine. And he explained that he really wanted the Apple TV to work because the way he was sitting in bed waiting for the treatment that he was going to get didn't allow him to look down at the iPad. So he would have had to hold it up here, but he couldn't do that because of his arms. So the angle at which the TV and the bed worked out allowed him to watch whatever TV show he wanted to on the Sci-Fi app up on the TV so that he could relax until his procedure. So those are the little stories that keep me going back to work each day, which is good because some days it's hard to go back to work. So the Apple TVs also cost-friendly because, again, as I said, all we're doing is using AirPlay. We're not taking any benefit from the rest of the now $150 or $60 cost of those Apple TVs. So we had to figure out how to make that work. And then the Mac Mini. So the Mac Mini came into play because, remember at the beginning I said about 100% security? So these iPads for the interactive patient system live in the rooms with the patients. In between patients, they have to be cleaned, physically cleaned, as well as electronically cleaned, because a patient that's there for a week in December might decide to do their Christmas shopping on it, or might log into the Facebook app, or, and I'm using those as examples because we've already taken care of the PHI, the lawsuit type of information that could be on these with the apps that we use. It's all contained in the apps. But the other Safari browsing or Twitter or Instagram or anything like that that people could log into, we didn't want to take the chance that people would forget. So we needed to wipe them in between uses electronically. And that's where this guy came into play. That's where, for anybody that was in the Apple session yesterday, that's where Configurator has come into play. And a plug for Jamf, because they're the only people doing this, and I'm not getting paid by them. I didn't do a disclosure at the beginning, but we're actually going to be implementing one of their pretty cool tools in 2 weeks that will interface with our, it's called an ADT feed. So it's where the patients are. When a patient is discharged in the system electronically, that will send a command to the iPad that is in their room and wipe it back to a state where we're safe. So I'm going to talk in a couple of slides about the iterations that we have gone through. But this Mac Mini has been invaluable in this process. I don't think we would be able to have accomplished this without it. Now, it's a double-edged sword because as it shows up there, scalable. It's pretty scalable. We've been able to work with them. We probably have about 25 deployed at this point. Low maintenance, they could be a little lower in maintenance just because you don't put UPSs with them, so when the power goes out, coming back up, it's not as clean. But the small footprint, we don't put a monitor, we don't put a keyboard, we don't put a mouse. All we do is put a lightning cable at the nurse's station that they plug them into, reload them. But that has led to issues with our workflow and the staff who are not really on board with something else to do that's not in the clinical world. So asking the nurses to take it out of the room, reload it, put it back, keep track of it, that's been our biggest struggle. So that's why this interface is going to, fingers are crossed, take care of that bit of angst, and we're going to be able to plow forward with more implementations. So that is IPS. These are kind of the versions that we've run into at the beginning. Monolithic image, that was fun. The reload process at that point took about 40 minutes because we were actually installing those 100+ apps. We weren't using DEP just for technical reasons. And at that point, we were doing the manual process with the nurses. V2 came out. We started to utilize MDM more. So this has been a 3+ year process. So the technology, as we all know, technology changes a lot in 6 months. So our technology rolled new features. Our friends at Apple started allowing MDM vendors to do more stuff. So we got into the whole self-service world from Jamf, allowing the patients to just pick those 100 apps out and install them on demand. So our reload time went from 40 minutes down to about 3.5, which was a satisfier for the nursing staff. They still didn't really like it, but now they didn't have to leave them and lose track of them after 40 minutes. Started to use DEP. So the step process that we used to have the staff go through, we've eliminated down to 1 step at the beginning after it reloads. And this is because, I think because Apple is headquartered out on the West Coast, when they default their time on their iPads, it defaults to that time, not here in Pennsylvania. So we have to have the staff enable location services. That's the one step in the process that we leave open. The rest of the stuff we just plow through, and that's worked. We actually are experimenting in a couple of situations where we have rapid turnover in our same-day surgery units, where we don't care about the time. We care that it gets reloaded as quickly as possible, because it will stop at enable location services and not load anything. It will sit, and then it will time out. So we're toying with the idea of, do we really care about time on the iPads? And then our version 3, which this month, coming soon to a unit near you, will be utilizing the automatic reload process, which is going to cause some other interesting things we have to figure out. And I will just throw this out here because we're a community. So if anybody has any bright ideas about good onboarding processes for iPads into a Wi-Fi environment, I'd love to talk to you afterwards, because what's going to happen is that iPads are going to reload, and then they're going to have to be joined to some sort of wireless network so DEP can kick in and do all the stuff. So that one piece right there, we've been talking with Apple, we've been talking with Jamf. We have some ideas, but we're always open to more ideas. So that's going to be one of the things that we're going to be dealing with soon. So lessons learned: Apple makes things fun in the enterprise. As I said, the consumerization of IT, it was really nice back in the day when Microsoft told us when they were going to be releasing their stuff. Apple's not so forthcoming. So when they would release OS updates, we would have to scramble and figure out how to test it quickly, how to make sure that things didn't conflict in configurator. Because back in our version 1, when we were using that kind of monolithic type of image, it didn't always play well with OS upgrades. So things are getting better. We're getting a little bit more information. It sounds like we're going to have the ability to defer some OS updates so that we have some testing, so that's good. But it's been fun. Leverage your vendors. So for those that don't have it and can afford it, engage with Apple. Figure out how to get the card of an SE. Our SE has been phenomenal. Our support team has been great. A lot of the stuff that we do, and again, this is not a sales pitch for Apple, but a lot of the stuff that we do has been made possible just through conversations and brainstorming sessions with the folks that we have access to in Apple. Don't trust anyone. So usually the first question that we get when we go to roll this project out is, well, patients are just going to steal these. You know, that's what's going to happen, because we have rolled this out on our inpatient side, but in the past year, our EDs, our emergency departments, in some cases have gotten iPads. Our same-day surgery areas where there's a lot of throughput have iPads. So that's the biggest worry. And in the 3+ years we've been doing this, we have had 6 iPads that have not been able to be recovered. And we're not going out and actively finding people and sending police after them, because for a number of reasons. But we can see through the MDM side where our iPads end up usually. Some have gone to Thailand. Some have gone to Lewistown, down the road from here. Some come back. We've had some stolen from one facility show up at a different facility. The worst thing that we have had to keep track of are lightning cables, as odd as it sounds. Lightning cables on those Mac Minis that are in staff areas. So that's why I say don't trust anyone. You would think you can trust your staff, but you can't trust your staff. So we've had to stock up on lightning cables, which in my mind with this whole project, if that's the worst thing that we're having to worry about, that's not too bad. Now, one thing that we that we had to figure out. We actually put outlet covers on top of chargers that we leave in the room, because at first we were just plugging them into the wall and leaving them in the room, and that's when they, even though we wrote Geisinger all over them, they still left. So don't trust anyone as you're scoping out your projects. Oh, do we have an Apple SE in here?
I'll cover some of that in the clinician side as well.
Okay. And then champions will help you win the war. So as we've continued to roll this out into new hospitals, our one up in Wilkes-Barre, one of our biggest lessons learned was, if you don't have somebody on the clinical side that will say, yes, this is a really good idea to their other compatriots, it's a very tough sell. So find those champions. That's like project management 101, but it's really important. It helps a lot. The Classroom Connect program. So I don't know how many of you watch Big Bang Theory or know about Double Robot, but that is a double robot there. And what one of our clinicians wanted to do, he was a pediatric behavioral specialist. He wanted to figure out if the kids that are stuck in a hospital, if there's a way to help them keep up with their classroom work. Now, obviously, if you're a kid sick in a hospital, do you really care about keeping up with your classroom work? Some do, some don't. But he was curious to see what kind of efficacy there would be with that. And then the other piece, which as many scientific experiments do, you're going down one road and then this other thing shows up. And the other goal of this, and this is the one that is now the majority of time, is to reduce social isolation. So kids that their normal routines are, they get up, they go to school, see all their friends, go home, go to sports things, see all their friends when they're stuck in a hospital. They don't have any of that. So this project was designed to figure that out. And shifting away from the MDM side of things and the Apple side of things to a specific vendor, Double, it worked out very well that this program is not a high volume program, but we've been running it for 3 years. We've probably averaged about 5 or 6 kids a year that take advantage of this in its full capacity. So basically what they do is they take our IPS iPad, we load Double app on it, and we partner with for those that are not from Pennsylvania and don't know, there are things called intermediate units in Pennsylvania, and they provide basically like consulting and outsourcing services to school districts. Everything from special education teachers to tech and purchasing and such. So we've partnered right now to date with 2 of these IUs, and we cover about 30 school districts in our footprint, and the IU folks will do all the logistical work with the schools because they have that relationship. So leveraging your partnerships there with those folks, it's allowed the quick deployment of these robots, because these kids who are in school or in the hospital, say for a week, there's a finite amount of time that they're going to get the benefit of it. So our turnaround time, we've reduced down to about 2 days now, where the program is offered to the patient in the hospital and we can get it up and running. 2 days is the most. We can usually get it up and running in a day if everything works out. So our lessons learned from this, the tech part's the easy. The workflow, working all that logistical stuff, that's the difficult part. But it is possible. And that's where relationship management comes in. Again, on the project side of things, you've got to play well with others and understand that others do know more than you. So HIPAA and FERPA, when you mix them together, they're similar, but there's a lot of legal agreements that have to go into place to make a project like this work. And I am so happy and thrilled that I don't have to deal with the school side of things that much, again, because we are insulated and we have a partner. So the one kind of good story, again, that keeps me going to work, we had a situation where there was a student, oh boy, we had a student who was stuck in the hospital during their homecoming time. Now, as I said before, the classwork is fine, but the social piece is where things seem to have progressed. So they were stuck in school during homecoming. And for those that have kids, you know, homecoming is a week-long process culminating with a soccer game or a football game at the end of the week, but a pep rally is involved in there too. So they were going to miss all of that. So what our child life specialists, who are, they're basically therapy folks who work with the kids in our pediatric hospital, what they arranged was to utilize this program to dress up the double robot in a football uniform, let it roll down to the pep rally so that the student could attend the pep rally. And they were able to attend the pep rally with all their friends, and it did wonders for their attitude. And, you know, did it really help them get better? Probably not. So this is one of those things that Geisinger does that's just a value add that costs, but it's offset by the goodwill that these kids get. So I'm going to kind of plow through these last couple things quicker. Language interpretation services. So back to government regulations, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you would like to call it, had, as many federal regulations do, all these extra things in it that probably didn't make things more affordable. And this, I feel, is one of them, political stuff aside. So in the Affordable Care Act, it says you as a healthcare organization have to provide language interpretation services to your patients if they need it. You cannot make them bring their own. You cannot cause them to not understand what you're talking about. So that caused Geisinger to have to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? Now, to some extent, we were providing this service beforehand, but when law came into play, we had to do it a little more concretely. So that's when we got into a very single-purpose device for this. iPads on a stick with wheels that connect to basically a kiosk app that we're using. Now, I put on here provisional DEP. This is the perfect project for that because our iPads were, through some very convoluted processes, they don't belong to us. These iPads belong to the vendor, and we still want to be able to manage them because having unmanaged iPads, that is probably the majority of the trouble tickets that my team gets are for these devices. So being able to use provisional DEP to get them into the fold and do at least a little bit of management with them. And for those that aren't aware of what provisional DEP is, I won't get into the details because Jeremy's got some more stuff to talk about, but go out to Apple's website and look it up. If you have iPads that don't belong to your organization, but you want to try to manage them, it seems to be a very useful tool, and hopefully we'll be working with that with this project. And then the last piece. So telemedicine is the other half of my team's job, and it's really cool. Aside from the IPS stuff, this is what's going to keep my team going for the next, I don't know how many years. Because for those of you that drove here or flew here, we are, well, State College is literally in the middle of Pennsylvania. You go a couple hours east to where we are, and that is in the middle of nowhere. So to get to an appointment for a patient, it could be a half an hour drive, it could be an hour drive. Or for the clinician, it could be the same drive out to one of our clinics to do outreach. And That's a patient dissatisfier. That's a cost inflator, because what a doctor is getting paid these days, they don't need to be driving and consuming that salary. So what telemedicine tries to do is exactly what it says: right care, right place, right time. And all the pictures that you see up there are things that in the telemedicine world are you guys as consumers should start to see more of these soon. So that right there, that doctor on an iPhone, for those that have not seen a direct-to-consumer app like Geisinger, again, not a sales pitch. If you go into the App Store and you look up Geisinger My eVisit, you will find an app that for $49 out of pocket, you can connect to a doctor on your phone anytime, anywhere, from as long as you have connectivity, and basically do a clinic visit, a clinic audio-visual visit. It's good for, you know, your child has an earache at midnight and you want to make sure that there's a prescription waiting at your pharmacy in the morning, right away. So you do something like that. You connect with the doctor right then and there and talk to them. They go through the diagnosis process. Now, they're not going to be providing, you know, opioids and really complex care, but there is a place for this, and it is a hugely growing market. As you saw in the video, doctors holding iPads. Gone are the days of a doctor wheeling around a big cart with a laptop on it and typing into it. It's all about mobility now. So from the telemedicine perspective, doctors want to be untethered from the hospital. They want to be able to, as crazy as this sounds, from their child's soccer game, out in the middle of the field, if they have a patient they need to check in on, they want to be able to do it from their phone, from their tablet. And it's happening today. So from an IT standpoint, it scares us to death, because you've got connectivity, you've got HIPAA, you've got all that kind of stuff that you have to worry about. But it's here today, and it is a hugely growing thing. And this last thing up here, that is it's a new product that has come out in the last year that we're actually starting to look at. And what it does is that cube on the left can accept a tongue depressor, a stethoscope, or an otoscope, and then through the iPhone there can allow a parent to do an exam, or, you know, husband, wife, partner could do an exam from home, stick that in the ear, and be guided through augmented reality to see the eardrum and send that image to the doctor on the other end of the phone or tablet, and then allow them to do a diagnosis. Now, not everybody's going to be able to afford this in their home, but there are use cases for complex care. People that are home, but if they get sick, have to go into the emergency room. But they're not, today, if they're not sure they go into the emergency room, they err on the side of caution. What this could potentially be used for is to check in with the emergency room. Do you really take a look at this wound and tell me if I really need to bring Johnny in? So again, this is today, and this is the cool stuff that we get to deal with. We get to help the doctors and allow those doctors to do care better, and enable them to help our patients. So I didn't mean it to be a transition, but that's an awesome transition, because I'm going to turn this over to Jeremy now and allow him to kind of go through what they do with the provider side of things.
Thanks, James. And honestly, one of the things I'm thinking about with that latest bit of telemedicine is even putting that in the hands of school nurses in our rural areas. That would be perfect. So James covered a lot of what we do on the patient side. There's another part of healthcare, and that's the people doing the care for the patient, right? Your providers, your nurses, your ancillary support staff, phlebotomists, and respiratory therapists, and all those folks. And it may seem simple that they are Geisinger employees, and so we can just put a device in their hands and tell them to use it, and that's what they'll do, right? No. How many of here, anybody in higher education? Okay, so working with doctors is a lot like working with university faculty. You get that? All right. So what we had to do before we ever put a single device in anyone's hands was find a way to pilot this to prove it was going to work, right? You're not going to put devices in everyone's hands and say, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. We had to prove it. And so what we did before we did any kind of mass rollout or even thought about a mass rollout was to find a partner in our anesthesia department in the hospital in Danville. And we agreed to purchase iPhones, give them a secure clinical messaging app, HIPAA compliant, give them access to the patient record using our electronic medical record vendor is Epic, so using Epic's mobile application. And we said, all right, let's try this for a few months, see what happens. What we did was we had them take a survey first that basically asked them, what are communication delays doing to patient care for you? And you can see the pre-iPhone, it went all the way from, half of the time it's preventing me from delivering the best care possible, all the way to fairly often there's medical errors that place the patient at risk of serious injury, all because I paged someone and they didn't get back to me in 10 minutes or, a week, however long it takes someone to get back to you, via pager. Once we gave them the devices, gave them the secure clinical messaging system and access to the patient record, you see what happened. Your error rate went down, your communication efficiency went up. We looked at this and said, you know what, we have the data here to show this is going to work. We took this to executive leadership. They said, absolutely, let's figure out how to make this happen. The initial thought was we would buy iPhones for everyone, all of our providers, all of everyone, and then we looked at what that would cost to put a phone in every provider's hand, and we said, we're going to have to come up with a different model, especially for our providers. Providers being physicians, advanced practitioners, nurse practitioners. And so we did another little study with our friends in neurosurgery. And we said, how are you communicating with other clinicians? And what we found is that, well, my goodness, a lot of you are already using your personal cell phones. What about that? How are you using your personal cell phones? Oh, we're sending text messages back and forth. You're doing that, and we're a HIPAA? No, hang on. We've got to fix this. And so what we ended up doing was having them use their phones with the secure clinical messaging system and the access to Haiku. And it turns out they really love the fact that they can do secure texting back and forth with other providers. So we're like, all right, we're on to something here. And so what we came up with were two ways of putting these devices in our clinicians' hands. The first was the Bring Your Own Device program, which was designed for physicians, advanced practitioners, folks that you would consider exempt. They get a salary, they're not hourly paid, they're expected to kind of be available. IT and the business side fall into that too, by the way. So we use our own devices with the secure messaging system and everything else we need. And then we also rolled out a nursing shared device program. So on the inpatient side, we actually do get the nursing departments to purchase iPhones for the nurses to use while on shift. They can leave that phone there and go home, and they don't have to use their personal device for several different reasons. One, the legality and human resource aspect of it. If a nurse is using their own device and they go home and they start answering clinical messages, they can technically come back and say, well, I was working, you owe me overtime. There's that aspect. But the other aspect is, the fact that they are required to leave their devices in lockers so that they're not doing personal things while on the job. But they still have a device so that they can do their job more effectively. The Bring Your Own Device program, so they both use what's called Tiger Connect. That's the vendor that we use for secure clinical messaging. It's HIPAA compliant. You can send pictures, videos, regular text. You can do group texting, all the kind of stuff you can do with your regular your texting, but it's all cloud-based, nothing stored on the phone, absolutely no PHI. It's fully HIPAA compliant. On the Bring Your Own Device side, physicians can use Haiku on the iPhone or Canto on the iPad, like you heard in the video. That gives them access to the patient's records. They can order medications. They can look at recent lab tests. They can look at all of this kind of stuff, either on their phone or tablet. The sister application to that on the nursing side is called Rover, and on the inpatient side, they can do things like hourly rounding, do your vital signs. They can do Muse scores. They can take pictures of wounds and put them into the medical record so that they can follow, track that over time, as they, redress wounds. We also put reference apps on the nursing devices. So there's an app called Nursing Reference Center Plus that provides them with evidence-based reference for whatever procedure that they're looking to do, whatever diagnosis the patient has. They can look it up on this app and see the most beneficial types of treatments, or how to do a certain procedure that they haven't done in several months, and so they need a little bit of a refresher on how to do that. This app will give them the evidence-based resources to be able to do that right from the bedside. Again, there's 200 plus apps that we manage through the self-service store if they're enrolled in MDM. The mobile footprint, right now, we have, actually we're up over 2,200 shared devices at 5 different hospitals now. 2 more hospitals with 400 more devices in the queue. Those are all up in the Northeast. We are extending to outpatient areas. We've got a couple of pilots for our ambulatory clinics with the Nursing Shared Device Program. So basically we have a little over 4,000 nurses, allied health professionals, and others using shared devices. 2,500 plus physicians on some form of Bring Your Own Device, and we have 2 different options for them for how to use their BYOD devices. And of course, you also have administration and IT and some other areas on the Bring Your Own Device plan as well. Real quick hit on what we do with secure clinical messaging. We are up sending a little over 2 million messages per month through these devices. So we were right, it worked. And it's actually working very well. And this is just a breakdown of kind of month over month, the different kinds of people that are using messages and how many messages they're sending per month. These are all slides, by the way, that we use for our new providers during orientation, so that we can continue to show that this is something that is working in the system. Just a few Tiger Tech stories or Tiger Connect stories that we use. Honestly, one of my favorites is not up here. It's actually very recent. Our life flight personnel, one of our life flight helicopters took off from Danville, went out to a campground in who knows where, Pennsylvania. Got called, they get there and find that the patient is having a stroke. They bring up their phone, video a stroke assessment, send that back via Tiger Connect to the stroke team in Danville so that they have complete record of what that patient looked like at the time. Use Tiger Connect to converse back and forth with the stroke team. Once they got up into the helicopter, they have to go into airplane mode, so then they have to go back to radio communication, radioed in to verify that they had seen the stroke assessment, had this conversation back and forth. They land, go into the ED, they redo the stroke assessment, they find that the patient is improved, because initially the stroke team was going to send them right to CT, to do some expensive testing, and the patient was going to be on the hook for paying that, or their insurance or whatever. They get there, realize that the patient has become a lot better as far as symptoms. They hold off on the CT, they do some other things instead. Patient turns out to be fine, recovering just fine, but they actually avoided a lot of unnecessary expensive testing. And you're like, wow, a healthcare system cares about avoiding testing. Yes, absolutely. If we don't have to make a patient go through it, why? And so that's one of my favorite Tiger Connect stories. And these kind of things happen all the time, just with that clinical efficiency.
I just jump in one thing. When you talked about stroke, it reminded me my last story on the telemedicine slide. Telestroke is a huge lifesaver, basically, that IT deals with in conjunction with the clinicians. There is literally 1 hour that a patient has that if they get a certain kind of medication, it can greatly reduce the effects of a stroke. And in telemedicine world, the technology that we support has caused us that paradigm shift to really have to understand the workflows of what the clinicians do, because they have that 1 hour, but within that 1 hour, that expensive CT test that Jeremy was talking about is one component of it. There's lab work. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen in addition to visualizing the patient and doing a series of tests that the physician does to see the patient. And in rural Pennsylvania, we contract with a couple of other outside health systems to provide that service in addition to all of our locations across the state. So that is something when we get a kind of an after action report, they do that for every stroke, and you see that the telemedicine connection took under the 20 minutes that it's required to take. Those are the emails that I get to send out to the team responsible for it to say, hey, look, this is really what you did to make sure that that equipment was working. You do the proactive checks, all the garbage that you go through putting up with people yelling at you. You got to help save this person. So that's my favorite story to tell from an IT perspective, because that's what helps.
Absolutely. If it seems like I'm talking fast, I am, because I've got 9 minutes. So with our Bring Your Own Device program, I mentioned they have two options. They can go into the mobile, a mobile access manager, MDM, area, or they can go to non-mobile access managed. We do allow them to have access to a lot of our systems without being managed. If they go with non-mobile access management, they can do the secure clinical messaging. They actually can do Epic, Haiku, and Canto and access the patient record without MDM. This is actually new as of the middle of June. Used to, we made them go through MDM because, as our information security office would gladly let you know, the app actually cached some PHI within the app, and they're like, if we need to wipe that, off of there. Epic has now upgraded their app to where nothing is stored on the phone. Therefore, our information security office said, okay, you no longer need to manage the app itself. We can just manage the access to the app. And the way they do that, number one, they have to have an absolute path to get to our electronic medical record, but that's security through obscurity. That's not going to work a lot of the time. But there's actually an individual app ID that has to be registered in the Epic system for that access to happen. And so if the phone goes missing, provider leaves it on an airplane or something, they notify the service desk, we can actually remove all access from that phone directly from the Epic side. We don't actually have to manage the phone themselves. Email, you can get that on the phone without being managed. However, if you do sign up, no matter how you sign up, you do have to put a PIN lock on your phone. But that's not actual MDM. That's just, I guess it sort of is. Right, and you can get Skype for Business. With mobile access management, you get everything else we have, everything that we need to control licenses for, like all of your Office products. A lot of our reference apps are licensed for providers, so we have to maintain the license. Some of our custom applications that we can deploy using VPP have to come through the self-service stores. So if they want things like, we have a dictation app that will allow them to dictate notes into their phones, but it's heavily customized. So we have to, it's not available in an app store. You have to be part of MDM to get that. And we have to tell them, no, we cannot hijack your phone, because that's what everybody thinks. If Geisinger's in my phone, I actually had a physician tell me that you can then get into my banking app. No, we have to convince them that we absolutely positively cannot do that. And it's a constant battle, right? We have to continually tell them that that's not possible. The shared device program, like I said, this is iPhone devices that are purchased for use during clinical shifts. Basically what this is we tell our departments to budget for their 2 largest shifts. So, nursing normally has 3 shifts. We tell them to budget for the largest 2. That way, first shift comes in, takes some iPhones, there's others left on the chargers. Second shift comes in, the phones turn over. Third shift comes in, the phones turn back over. So there's as many on the chargers as there are out. And that's how that works. What's on it? All of the you see there, the Tiger Connect, Epic apps, IV guidelines that have been set by Geisinger, our paging system, our lab test catalog, the self-service app store that they can use to do all of their apps as well. In this model, each individual nursing department pays for the phones and everything else. I did take off all of the prices because we have negotiated nice prices with other people. Negotiate your own prices. But we can break it down for them to say, here's how much everything's going to cost for you. They can opt into this, they can opt out of it. So far, everybody's opted in. They see the efficacy of what we're doing, and they opt in. James, like you were saying, champions will help you win the war. A lot of times what we'll have is the VP of nursing at a particular hospital will say, we absolutely want this, everybody get on board, let's go. That certainly helps. Charging blocks and charging stations. You mentioned your cords go missing. We actually developed, we worked with facilities to develop charging blocks that are actually locked so that they plug in and then the strip of cords are actually inside this box and cannot be taken out. So we had the same problem with cords disappearing, and so we figured out a way to actually lock them down. But yeah, they got to pay for those too. Otherwise, we tell them to order a lot more charging cords. We actually teach them about mobile device use etiquette, right? It's not so much just to have the device, but how do you do this and interact with patients appropriately? Verbalize what you're doing. Hey, I'm going to check on something for you. Hey, I need to check with this specialist. I need to check with another doctor. Disengage, do what you're going to do, re-engage. We have a lot of features available on the phones and the various apps. We educate them on what those are and use them as appropriate. And make what you're doing short, sweet, and informative to the other clinicians. As far as sending like secure clinical messages. Short, sweet, informative, back and forth, and then re-engage with the patient. What have we learned from this process? People hate having personal devices managed. Don't manage the devices in that setting if you don't have to. Manage the risk and the apps themselves. Understand the apps that people want and understand if you actually need to manage them or not. If you can just manage the access that they have, that's a much better route. My boss actually got beat up over and over and over again introducing the BYOD program to physicians until we learned that lesson of, let's try not managing the devices and manage the other things instead. However, people love having work devices managed. If you can hand them a device that they can use during the day or it's a work-owned device, manage the heck out of it. Do whatever you can. Our nursing shared device program, if they walk off of the hospital campus, it basically becomes a brick. They bring it back, it magically works again. And they absolutely love that. Start small and get the data to back up whatever you're going to try to do first. If you try to do a massive rollout, even if you have executive backing, it's going to be kind of tough. So what you would, if you can, start small, get the data, and then try to sell it from there. Make it their idea. Like you were saying, get those champions in. Make it something that they're excited about doing. Work with your security. Just because security says no at one point doesn't mean you can't revisit as apps become more mature. That's something that we've done. Like I said, we took Epic, Haiku, and Kanto out of MDM just recently by working with our security folks. and manage the risk and access first before getting into managing a device, if at all possible. I left 18 seconds for
There you
questions,
go.
thoughts, and ideas. Yes.
You said you had an unmanaged bring your own device
Mm-hmm.
workflow.
Mm-hmm.
How, by putting email on there, how do you deal with the risk of attachments, having somebody take a screenshot, attach it to an email and send it out?
So our email program.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Yeah, they've done it somehow. 'Cause I know, because I actually use Apple's mail program, not Outlook, and I still had to pin lock my phone, so they locked it down from that perspective. Mm-hmm.
So our time is up, but we'll be here off to the
Right.
side since the music's playing. So
Any questions, anything?
Thank you all very much.